Harihi Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in Vedic literatures. But so the modern context is it's not necessarily that they'll always be taking advantage of the Brahmins and their experience and their knowledge of scriptures. Some do, but we generally see it's not such a major aspect. And then also is that it's given by the Vedic literature. So even if someone does take advantage of the Brahmins, let's say like, I don't know about here, but like the American system, the president has what's called a cabinet, which is like all the, people who are very expert in all these various areas that, may have some influence. I don't remember how many are there, but so it's basically like his Brahmins, and he meets with them when he wants to make decisions and all that before the official going out and his presentations to, let's say, the Congress and the Senate and all those things. So you do have that, but then it won't be based on Vedic literature. So the one aspect is there of listening to the Brahmins, but then the Brahmins aren't speaking in the Vedic literature. So then you have more of a balanced and complete system because things work because of their laws of nature. Right? That's the mechanics of everything. And so Krishna's, they're his laws. So the more you see its connection to Krishna, the better it'll work. So that's why the Vedic system will always work better than a modern system, because it's speculative. Not that there's not valuable things in the modern, but they're only valuable in as much as they're in connection with the laws of nature. And the knowing this knowledge and connection with the laws of nature only has a value in as much as you see it in connection with Krishna consciousness. Does that make sense? So then for Pariksit Maharaj, then they're speaking on the Vedic literatures, the knowledge, and they have the proper God consciousness. Well, in the modern scenarios, then by the secular state, it can't be specifically about God consciousness. It's not coming from the Vedic literature, so the experience and knowledge that's there may be correct, might not be correct. That's the whole point. So depending on where you start, if I start with all proper information, there's a better chance I'll get a proper result. We saw there's doubt, the intelligence, there's doubt. How is it explained there? Those are 5 aspects of.
Doubt.
No, but I'm saying what are the 5 aspects of?
Intelligence.
Intelligence, yes. So intelligence, you have doubt, what to do, this and that. So depending on what information you have, you'll come up with a better or a worse understanding. So if you start with the Vedic version, then it's always easier to come up with something that's more in line with the modes of nature. Does that make sense? Modes of nature, laws of nature, they're the same. Does that make sense? It's just mechanically how things work. Okay. There was no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some purpose. Like you had a standard, you just go by it. On the modern thing, you bring up whatever politically works for you now, then you keep changing it as it works or doesn't work. Does that make sense? You do something for your political party, it works good for the party, but then the people don't react nicely, so now you start to adjust the wording, so now the people will be happy because, it already worked for you, you're already in power. So, all these different things. So the problem is it's not about politics. Politics are used in administration, but it's not about politics. It's about properly establishing, the situation that is according to Krishna's direction. And so that makes it the most favorable for everybody to be involved in devotional service, right? If my environment I'm in is Krishna conscious, I have the facilities to be Krishna conscious, then performing the activity, is both efficient and Krishna conscious. That's what the management's for. Does that make sense? But if it's simply for some political purpose, then the facility environment you're in is not going to be necessarily viable as actually being practical or for Krishna consciousness. Does that make sense? So we see what we're managing. We're managing that the environments that everybody's working in is such that they can come as close as possible as proper performance of their duties, the way of technicality, and they can be Krishna conscious. But the Krishna consciousness, that's something that will always be there, and then the facility may be better or less. It's just like when after the, I think it was, what is it? After the East Bloc was no longer the East Bloc, it was just part of Europe, Does that make sense? Yeah, so then what is it? In Latvia and Riga, then they got a new place, because at those times you had all this stuff, everything was cheap, for a couple of $100 you could buy, a place like this, stuff like that. So they had a place kind of like this, and the same, old wood and this and that. And when they had it, there was no roof. That's how they got it. So that's where they start. So technically it wasn't your ideal situation, but they were Krishna conscious. So that's the first thing. Then you slowly over the time, make it better and better so it works better in Krishna consciousness, so it's more efficient. So the primary is always the Krishna consciousness, and the secondary is the particular technique that can be used, a particular facility, to express or engage in devotional service. Does that make sense? It's just like we can cook for Krishna on a tin can and a few bricks or rocks out in the backyard with a few sticks, like that, right? And offer that to Krishna. Now with time, we might develop a better kitchen. But the Krishna consciousness, that's always steady. That's what it mentions in the Bhagavatam about devotional service being steady and constant. Right? So that is the most important. Then, accordingly, how much you can arrange the secondary aspects of the knowledge, the technique, the facilities, then that just makes it nicer and nicer to offer to Krishna. But it's not that makes it better. It's the Krishna consciousness makes it better. Does that make sense? Yes.
So if I understand right, I clarify. If I cook rice in a tin can, because that's what's available, but the Krishna consciousness is just as pleasing as cooking in a very nice kitchen.
Yes, it'll be just as pleasing to Krishna because the devotion is there. But since we want a nice result for Krishna, in other words, the secondary is about the interaction and results to express our devotion to Krishna. So therefore, as a cook, you want to have get better results for Krishna, therefore you improve the quality of the kitchen. But it's not the improving the quality of the kitchen that makes it devotion. It's to be used in the service of devotion. So devotion is independent. It doesn't care what's going on. Because even if you don't have a tin can to cook in, you just offer something raw to Krishna and he'll accept it. You know what I'm saying? As long as it's something edible, but Does that make sense? Yeah, so in other words, you have the pot to cook in, you cook the cabbage. You don't, you shred it up and make it into a salad. But you offer it to Krishna, that's the whole point. Does that make sense? That's the constant thing. So that's the point as managers, as leaders, they're supposed to always see how to be Krishna conscious. The others may or may not always be Krishna conscious. Right? So the point is, the manager being in the position is to see that there's to manage an always Krishna conscious environment and facilities. So that people can be Krishna conscious. That's what it's for. It's not just to manage. It's to manage that everybody has a Krishna conscious environment. Does that make sense? So if that's seen, we can see here from the expression of Pariksit Maharaj, that's what's going on. Not that he doesn't know detail, he's managing an empire, so he does know detail. But the point that's being brought out here is that he is Krishna conscious, and he listens to other authorities in Krishna conscious so that he performs his devotional service based on the scriptures. And he sees that the technical points of what he's doing is also properly based on scriptures. And he's able to influence others that they also appreciate and understand and take up advancement in Krishna consciousness. So it slightly extends the definition of management as we're used to. Because we think it's, oh yeah, we're devotees, now let's get into the technique. But the point is, if you can't connect the two, then what's the point? Because remember, devotees have been making a very concerted effort in management. You know, learning and studying and getting karmic books and going through all these things, you know, for the last 22 years. Maybe even more, 24 years. I think 94, 94 was kind of introduced as a major thing. Does that make sense? But I don't see managements increasing in general. Right? Individuals, they are Krishna conscious, they apply it, they're getting very excellent results. But it's not because they took this management course, that's why they're doing good. It's because they're Krishna conscious, that's why they're doing good. Right? Does that make sense? You have temples where a temple president isn't that experienced and it's a nice temple. You have another temple where he's materially very experienced and it's not so great. Does that make sense? So, because it's Krishna consciousness is the name. Then if you see it back, then you make the connection. That devotional service, the technique of management is my service. And since the result of the management is being offered to Krishna, therefore, the better I can make that result, the better. So that means some of the technique is improved, the facilities are improved. Does that make sense? So that's how it works. That's the connection. It's important, the secondary is important, but it's only important in as much as it supports the primary. And the better you can see the connection, the more technically it works nicely. So, the rules and regulations were already set forth by great sages like Manu, Yajnavalkya, Parasara, and other liberated sages. And the enactments were all suitable for all ages in all places. Right? So that's very important because sometimes the devotees will make the mistake that what's set forth by Manu and others, that it's only applicable in previous ages. But that's one thing that there is the Manu, Yajnavalkya, Parasara. Therefore, Manu is for all ages. Parasara is specifically for Kali Yuga. And Yajnavalkya, I think I'm not exactly sure, but it's still point. Prabhupada mentions these three. So his point is the knowledge that's given in these three literatures are always applicable. It's not that, oh, it's Kali Yuga, they don't apply. No, they always are applicable. So therefore, for administrators, they should know these things properly. But you have to know the context of devotional service and how the acharyas explain it to us. Does that make sense? So most of the basic things, how you live your lifestyle or basics of the management, that goes the same. The only difference that will come up is in punishment. Right? For us, then we understand as being Krishna conscious, that's the actual correction. Right? When we're talking about reformation, it means reforming the consciousness. Right? So for us, it's reformation, not retribution. For the materialists, they think the material situation is the real thing. So if you've done something wrong in the material situation, you have to have an effect in the material situation to balance it. But for the devotees, if there's something wrong going there, it's only because you're not Krishna conscious. Correct the Krishna consciousness, then everything will go all right. So the effort is on that. So therefore, the whole elements of retribution that Manu talks about, that's not so necessary. Not that it doesn't apply in this age. Yes, for the karmis it still applies. But for the devotees, then there's not so much effort. So therefore, you take what is given for the Brahmins. How Brahmins are dealt with, that's then what's used for the Vaishnava community. For the non-Vaishnava community, then you use, as it mentions, for all the four varnas. Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay. So here's, problems made, and this is first canto, so we understand it's important. Therefore, the rules and regulations were standard and without flaw or defect, right? So you didn't make up legislation. You just applied the already existing legislation, right? One already has given legislation. Now it's just a matter of applying that to the particular time, place, circumstance that you're in. Right? Kings like Maharaja Pariksit had their council of advisors, and all the members of that council were either great sages or brahmanas of the first order. They did not accept any salary, nor had they any necessity for such salaries. Like we see Prabhupada's even mentioning about Chanakya. He was the prime minister for the king. In fact, it's only through Chanakya. He found the king, he trained him, and he organized in such a way that he was able to become the emperor. But he took no salary. So he lived in his little hut. He didn't even live in the palace ground. He lived in his own little hut, and he'd go out begging, he maintained himself. So that's the thing, it's not a, because as soon as it becomes a salary job and all that, then you take on the element, then you're part of the bureaucracy. Does that make sense? So then you're a Shudra. So the point is the Brahmins are independent. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that they might not eat something there, or this or that. It's not king gives them gifts and all that, but it's because they're a Brahmin. So he gives charity, he does that, but they don't have a salary. Does that make sense? So things are taken care of. Does that make sense? Yeah. The state would get the best advice without expenditure. They would, because then if the state is giving charity, the state's getting benefit from that, not a loss from that. Right? If you're paying a salary, you're losing money. And then they give the work according to that. It's going the opposite way. While the Brahmins are giving you work, you're not giving. They're not taking salary, you might give them charity. It's a very different mentality. One is ashram, the other is varna. You work, you get paid. The other is that you're performing your duties, and that's being respected. And so as the king, as the state, when it's giving you charity. So you're getting that pious benefit from that. By paying your workers, you're not really getting, it means of course you're supposed to, but it doesn't get the same kind of result. Does that make sense? Yes.
Maharaj, if somebody has nature of Brahmana and works, for example, as an academic teacher or a scientist, but he receives salary, is he considered a Shudra just on the basis of receiving salary, although his nature may be Brahmana?
Means technically that's the problem with the modern society, is that it's varnashram, but it's not very scientific, because who's the head of the university, right? It's a good I don't know about here, but in many places the businessmen take over, right? Because it becomes a business thing, and so the better you do, the better you get paid, and those who don't do so good get laid off. Like that. Unless you have something like, do you have tenure here? Tenure. In America, you have this thing, tenure means you've been there for a certain amount of time. Even if you're terrible, they can't get rid of you. You're eternally there. You're like cockroaches and stuff. It's specifically an American thing. I don't know if they do that here. No, I know it's specifically there because it's the other parts of the world that you do PhD, you can do higher degrees. America doesn't have. So above being a PhD, there's tenure. So it's an economic consideration. It's not that you know more. It's supposed to be that you're so knowledgeable and experienced that therefore then, this person should be kept no matter what. That's what its original purpose was. But now it's simply an economic kind of consideration. So that's the problem with the modern society, is that if you have a bourgeois society, right, and the modern democratic society is bourgeois, right, so that means what? Everything's about money, so that means everybody works for somebody. So that's the problem, is that it's not very scientific. So you do the best you can. So in other words, you act according to your nature, but they don't necessarily deal with you according to nature. In other words, you're doing the service of a Brahmin, but they don't deal with you like a Brahmin. But what can you do? So if you can afford to just do something else, then yes, but if not, then that's life. Does that make sense? That's the problem with the modern culture. You're a doctor, but the hospital is owned by Vaishyas also. You know, it's just like somebody comes into emergency, you know, the natural thing would be to take care, but nowadays they check if you have insurance before they take care. And if they do, then they take care, and if you don't, they don't. You know? Does that make sense? Unless the state has some kind of welfare kind of, you know, an element of that kind of health, you know, socialistic health thing that they'll take care because the government pays, then it's okay. But if it's purely you have money, you pay, and you don't have money, you don't pay, then you have a problem. Does that make sense? So they can't act according because it's hospital policy. You know, in their own private practice, then they can, you know, do things that adjust. Does that make sense? Because that's the difficulty in the modern. It's all about the economics of things. It's not about something higher. You know, it's not about the philosophy or the religion. You know, it's just about the economics. So you do the best you can. Because you'll use money for Krishna, and you know, you'll be a devotee, so it works out. And then you can also maintain that you're humble, and even though in society you're a big Brahmin, but technically you're a Shudra, because they're paying you, so, so you can afford to be humble. Does that make sense?
Yes, and the same applies. I'll give you another example because I spoke with my friend. He has a degree, university degree, and he claims that he's a Kshatriya, but he works in a business for a Vaishya, but he has responsibility of dealing with many people. He manages the. He claims that he's a Kshatriya, so.
He may be of a Kshatriya nature, but
yes,
the point is he's not doing Kshatriya duties.
Okay.
Because Kshatriya means the essence of a Brahmin means you study and teach. So that you can do, you know, even though you know it has a regular salary and all that kind of thing. But for a Kshatriya, it's protecting the people. So how is he protecting the people? You understand? It's an economic thing.
Well, he claims that he takes care of many people. You know that the boss trusts him.
Yeah, he takes care, but also does he take care, like, say, you know, the guy's like, say, having some problem financially, or his kid got sick and gives him some money and does all that kind of jazz, or he just takes care on the thing. So maybe in as much as that, yeah, it means you apply how much you can. So as long as he's seeing, you know, how to protect the people, and then yes, you could do it, but it's not the same like the Brahmin. It's not your ideal situation. You know what I'm saying? Because he's working in a business environment, maybe doing Kshatriya kind of stuff, but you know, you have like that because you don't have really great opportunities for Kshatriyas to be, you know, do stuff. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So. Yes.
Is it simple to, let's say, you're a Brahmana, but then you're doing the work of some other Brahmana? Is that simple?
It's a matter of what's available. In other words, if you have a Brahminical nature and Brahminical occupation is available, but you don't take it because you get the, you know, other benefits you might get from doing another Varna's duties, that's sinful. But if the Brahminical is not available and you're doing of the other Varnas, then that it works like that. Generally, you try to avoid a Shudra, but as we see, you know, how you say, the modern man takes very seriously, you know, the Shastric statement of everyone's born a Shudra in Kali Yuga. So, you know, it says right there, hey, so we're going to make sure they're all Shudras. You know, we've elevated ourselves up to Vaishyas, but everybody else can remain a Shudra. Hey, we're good.
So if we think that, oh, I'm a Brahmana, I shouldn't take any job at all because then I will lose my political power and then the family is, you know, suffering economically.
Yes, but here's the thing is down here, we're just going to stop you there. See, is what we were discussing before, is that you have the process of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So Shravana means you hear, Manana means you contemplate, Nididhyasana is then from that contemplation and practice. You contemplate and practice is manana, and then from that you get realization. So it becomes value, it becomes, just part of your life. So this is happening, is like we said, the knowledge is coming in through the senses, like that, we're hearing it, then we go into the memory, where, then we get that samskar. But this is all happening in chitta, in the mind, still in the mind, but the mind is the conscious mind, not just the mechanical that it works with the senses. So that's all part of Shravana. Now when this brings up a samskar of a feeling and this and that, in our personal life or what we've seen in others' lives and all that, then that's there, that's going to come up. But then you have to take it into the next part of the manana, where we contemplate, reasoning, in other words, the intelligence. Okay, how does that apply into my situation, the situation that's there? And then working that out, then you're using the, because there's a doubt how to work it out. And then you work it all out, and then it's done. In other words, you've taken the principle, applied it into the detail, you've come up with a solution, and now it's not. Now, if you can't work it out, there's a doubt, then you bring up a question, but never bring up a question that you've just heard it and it immediately brings up an emotional, because just to let you all know, in the next 5 days, I will not answer those questions. So you have to try to work it out. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes?
All the women brahmanas when they are Krishna conscious.
Are all the Brahmin women Krishna conscious?
Are all the women brahmanas when they are Krishna conscious?
Are all the women Brahmanas when they're Krishna conscious? Anyone is a Brahmin when they're Krishna conscious. Shudra, this, that. But that's Brahman on the ashram side. You understand? By their own sadhana, by their understanding Krishna consciousness, Vaishnavas are Brahmins. Because the ashram system is only Brahminical. It doesn't have there's no Shudra ashram, or, you understand, there's only, the ashrams are Brahminical, but they're able to function in that capacity. But it doesn't mean that their occupation won't be according to their varna. Right? You might, let's say, have a devotee who is a Shudra by varna, but being nicely Krishna conscious, he functions as a Brahmin. The way of his consciousness, his interaction with devotees, his considerations of, devotional service and activities in his life. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then, but at the temple, he may lead kirtan, he may give class, he's second initiated, he may do puja for the deities. But how he maintains himself, he goes out, he has a job. Does that make sense? Yes, so at his job, he's the Shudra, he listens to the boss. He doesn't go, well, actually, I'm a Brahmin, so I should be telling you what to do. No, he doesn't do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They were themselves, okay, this is the council of advisors. They were themselves samadarshi, equal to everyone, both man and animal. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals, right? Because in the Vedic literatures, you always see that it always mentions man and animals. Like in the marriage ceremony, it's always talking about man and beast. It's always talking about both, so you see that equality between all of them. Because then you actually see properly, then you can apply the Shastra properly. Because then you're seeing the soul. That's the difficulty in the modern, is they may be worried about things about a man or a particular group here. Like that. Within mankind, there's a certain, you can still use mankind here, or do I need to use humankind or people kind,
Yeah,
It's okay? Okay. We won't have people marching in the streets. Okay, good. Not yet. Okay. Good. Shows that there's still some intelligence. Okay. Right. They can discern what you're trying to say and not get caught up in the semantics of the word. Okay. So then people will take their own group, and that's all. And here is you're saying what works on everybody. But at the same time, as you're applying it in a specific locale, let's say you have a king here, he has to apply the laws that apply for everyone, universal for everybody. So you have to consider that. but at the same time, it's being specifically applied to the local. So the local people get the specific benefit, but they won't get their benefit at the expense of, let's say, other kingdoms. Does that make sense? You know, so like that, you have to balance the whole thing. Just, yeah, we're good with that, or doesn't? Okay. So that's why it says both man and animal, right? So it means you're seeing about everybody. Okay. Such council members were not fools or representatives to compose a fool's paradise. Right? Because the point is your representatives of the people will let you know what the people want, but you still have to have administrators that are looking out after everybody. Because now, let's say I vote for somebody, it means I vote for the one who's doing the things I want. And others are voting for what they want. But the king should be functioning in such a way that he takes care of what everybody wants. Right? So this party kind of thing doesn't work as good. Like that. They were all self-realized souls, and they knew perfectly well how all living beings in the state would be happy, both in this life and the next. Right? So they're dealing with the scriptures, so they know what it takes to, elevate yourself, to be God conscious. At the same time, what is needed for just the day-to-day things to go on. The regular economic, the social, the family, all these things. So they know all that. All that together, then they can advise on the administrative level. And if they don't know all that, then don't, work within your own area. Don't advise there. If someone has that rabbinical nature, then they'll do those acts. Maybe they can preach nicely or do the puja or this or that. But they won't be able to deal with something that deals with everybody. Does that make sense? So those who can, they can advise on that level. That makes sense? Yeah. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, and be merry and enjoy. Yeah, I guess the merry and enjoy would be the love part. Right? They were philosophers in the real sense and knew well what is the mission of human life. Right? So they were philosophers, meaning it's based on scripture and the actual thing. They know the Vaishnava understanding. That's real, because otherwise you can say there's philosophy, but there's real philosophy. So that you can be philosophical and all that, that's philosophy. But real philosophy means it's connected to Krishna. It's based on the scriptures. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And they knew very well what is the mission of human life. Under all these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions. Right? So that's what he says, under all these obligations. Right? Because we saw before is that you have doubt, you have to work it out. So there must be, from that, you should get correct, what did they use, what's the word you use?
Apprehension. Correct apprehension and misapprehension.
Yes, so they're getting correct apprehension. They're actually understanding what is to be done. Because they're based on Shastra, they're based on Krishna consciousness. And so from that they get the correct apprehension what to do. Does that make sense? So they know the philosophy, they know the technique that the Shastra says, and with that, then they put that together, they get the correct apprehension. But if you don't start off with the Shastra, you don't start off with Krishna consciousness, then there's every chance you may get misapprehension. You come up with something that doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually work according to the modes of nature. Right? So it's very scientific, you can see. And in this, it has that proper balance between the personal and the impersonal. Right? The impersonal means the mechanics, the personal means then the effect that it's going to have on the individuals. Under these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions. And the king, or executive head, being himself a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinize and follow them for the welfare of the state. And so Prabhupada says king or executive head. He says, technically as a devotee, we're not really worried what is the setup. So they could be a king, they could be a chancellor, they could be prime minister, they could be a president, whatever system is there, we're not worried about it. The main point is if they're a qualified devotee, they can make the system work. But if they're not qualified, then it's a problem. Like that, or if they're qualified but everybody else is not, it's a problem. So the idea is administration, everyone should be qualified in Krishna consciousness, right? And know their field. You know the scriptures dealing with your field. Does that make sense? So you have the Krishna consciousness based on Shastra, and you also know the knowledge of technique. Does that make sense? And you can connect the two. Then it becomes very nice. And the king or executive head himself, being a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinize they follow them for the welfare of the state. The state in the days of Maharaja Yudhishthira or Maharaja Pariksit was a welfare state in the real sense of the term, because no one is unhappy in that state, be he man or animal. Maharaja Pariksit was an ideal king for a welfare state of the world. And so we can see in the Vedic sense, it's a welfare state, but at the same time as capitalism goes on, the socialism is there, the monarchy is there, and the Brahmins have their independence. So the Vedic system is the only one that can use all these four systems together at once, because each one has their place where it applies. Everyone being taken care of, that's the welfare state. That those who know how to generate money can generate money. And there's no state controls other than they don't charge more than should or don't deal in things that are inappropriate. Does that make sense? Like that. Administrators, they have their rule, they can take care of, they are the final say. But at the same time, as they work under the Brahmins, but the Brahmins are independent, they're not controlled by the state. So you have all the aspects that everybody talks about in a political sense, all working there perfectly together. It's because each one knows where it is. The Brahmins are independent, but they don't control the state. Right? So you can't be independent and control. You know what I'm saying? If you have no obligation, you have no authority. You understand? But because it's based on scripture, they have to act according to scripture. Brahmins know scripture. Therefore, then they advise what will be done according to scripture. But if you're going to do it or not, that's the choice of the king. Does that make sense? So you have all these systems work together. So it's a welfare state, and because most people in the state of the citizens, they have to function in a welfare state. But the problem with the welfare state is the capitalists, then they feel they'll make less money or they're not allowed to make their money. But no, they make their money as long as it doesn't disturb anybody. Right? So the people get their facility without disturbing. It means you can't get facility without working. Everybody has to work. Right? Does that make sense? So welfare state doesn't mean nobody works. Welfare state means everyone's taken care of. Does that make sense? You do your job, you do your things, everything's taken care of. Yeah. Yes?
What is, we have been knowing about the Brahman, like the who born in the Brahman families. And on the other hand, we have been knowing that who can perform the knowledge of Brahma, they can be Brahman.
Yeah.
So, but reality is that we see our society or in our Sanatan family, Vedic family or Hindu family, all pujas are performed by those kind of Brahman who ancestor of Brahman. But
Yeah.
not we never seen that kind of Brahman who never born in Brahman family but become a Brahman like that in Ramakrishna mission or ISKCON, then they acquire knowledge from the Brahman. But what actually the reality? Because in that kind of discussion with them who were born in the Brahman family, they always say that no, they cannot be Brahman. We are Brahman because we were born in the Brahman family. Like, what is the reality actually? What is the reality?
Yeah, the reality is who has the qualification. It would be just like this. Let's give another example. Let's say a child is born in a family where the mother and father are lawyers, right? So now, because that child is born in that family, when he grows up, now can he be a lawyer? Or does he have to go to school and get trained? Yeah, so that's the Vedic system. So the Vedic system is you're born in a family of Brahmins. That's good, because by that association you'll tend to be inclined towards brahminical activities. But if you don't develop the knowledge and skill of a Brahmin, you're not classified as a Brahmin. You're classified as whatever you are. Right? So in other words, if he takes up business, he's a businessman, he's a Vaishya.
Yeah, this is the, I already told you that it depends on of the activities, who are doing the knowledge of Brahma, he is Brahman, who is the administrator. he will
No, but I don't understand what's the problem here. What's the doubt?
Problem is that the total society is that we have the many kinds of pujas. Pujas is performed by the Brahman who are born in the Brahman families. But only few we see that in Ramakrishna Mission and the ISKCON, the Brahman who are not born in the Brahman families, but they will become.
Yes, so what's the doubt? I don't
Doubt means
understand.
that in society cannot
In society, Brahmins don't, because then if it was by qualification, how many of them would be Brahmins? So that's the whole point. It's just a prestige thing. It's a social thing. That's all. It's just that I'm born in the family, automatically I'm a Brahmin. But the point is no, you have to be qualified, then you're a Brahmin. So this thing by birth, that's not a Vedic system. They've created it, but it's not Vedic. Vedic is by qualification. Generally, someone born in a Brahmin family will generally always be a Brahmin. But if they're not, then they're classified whatever they are. So when they're born, you deal with them like they're a Brahmin. But once they get to adult, then if they're not acting like one, you don't treat them like one. But as long as they're under the care of their father, then you deal with them as a Brahmin socially. But you only invite them to do your pujas and that if they are. Okay, text 2. King Pariksit married the daughter of King Uttara and begot 4 sons, headed by Maharaja Janamejaya. Purport. Maharaja Uttara was the son of Virat. Oh, okay. Okay, so the daughter of Virat married Abhimanyu. And so then the son of Virat, his daughter then married Pariksit, who was the next generation afterwards. Okay. Maharaj Uttara was the son of Virat and the maternal uncle of Maharaj Pariksit. Iravati, being the daughter of Maharaj Uttara, was the cousin sister of Maharaj Pariksit. The cousin brothers and sisters were allowed to get married if they did not belong to the same gotra or family. Right? So, in other words, if they're the same family, same gotra, then they can't be married. Cousins can't. But if they're from different, then they can. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense how it works. It works on one side of the family, not on the other.
Okay, they're cousins, but not from different families.
Your father's brother's, let's say, daughter is going to be the same family as you.
Same lot, yeah.
Yes, but your father's sister's child is going to be a different line because she's marrying another man, so the actual line is different.
But genetics are the same. I mean,
No, because the genetics are coming down, the seed's coming down through the father. The mother's the field. It's just like you have a field.
genes are
Here, listen. You have a field, right? Now, in that field, I can grow anything, right? Now, what happens when I plant an eggplant seed? What do I get? An eggplant, right? Now, if I plant cauliflower, I'll get cauliflower, right? Now, according to the land, now whether that land is better for a cauliflower or for an eggplant, that's another thing. That's why you see that husband and wife are matched. So therefore, let's say the husband's an eggplant, you want to marry a field that is favorable to eggplant. So that's why, let's say, a Brahmin man marries a Brahmin woman by nature, because then the field and the seed match. You'll get a Brahmin. right? But let's say I plant an eggplant seed in sand, I won't get a very good eggplant. But if I plant spinach in sand, I'll get excellent spinach. You understand? So therefore, then the point is that daughter is coming down to that seed from, in other words, it's connected with the eggplant, not with the field.
But then in the science, it's proven, I mean, that genetically, like it's 50-50.
But they don't really look at it from the Vedic point, so they don't experiment that way. It's just like cigarette companies doing their experiments whether smoking's bad for you or not, right? And so from the 50s, they've always come out that it's good for you and that it's okay for you or it won't kill you. So it's only when the government said, no, it'll kill you and you have to put it on the box that this will kill you. They have that here? You get the box of cigarettes in big letters that says this will kill you. Right? But otherwise, according to their experiments, things are fine. So the point is unless you start from the Vedic version and then do your experiments, there's a good chance you won't come up with it, because even if you come up with the things, you won't know what you're looking at. You know what I'm saying? Just like modern scientists, then, you know, our forefathers had to be monkeys. But at the same time that Neanderthal there, they also find bones and evidence of modern man, but they disregard it because it doesn't go with the theories. Well, the Vedic theory is modern man and tribals have always lived together eternally, so of course you'll find both of them together.
Yes, I'm just thinking because of the chances, like, you know, in the countries, for example, where people were literally blind up, like Nordic countries where, you know.
Yes, but the point is they have to be different families.
Yes, I understand. I was just thinking about the chances of inheriting disease.
Yes, but the point is that's because they don't discriminate. They marry any cousin.
Yeah, okay.
Like that. You understand? But this is a specific thing. Not all members in the Vedic society follow this. But we see here amongst the Kshatriyas a lot of it is being followed. Also in South India they also follow this. But in North they don't. So the general rule is swajati and swagotra. You don't marry into. So swagotra means that they are different gotras. But then, so that's the main thing. And so it's mentioned here, they're different gotras, they're different lines, because the line will come down to the man. And so then, basing on what that is that if the girl's father's line is different from the boy's father's line, they can't get married. Now, if you want to be more strict, that's swajati. Means you won't have a common ancestor, you know, for 7 generations. So that's the more strict. So many follow both, because that's what Manu recommends. But many also follow this, just the Sagotra, because how often are these cousins getting married? You know what I'm saying? Now if you have, you know, out of some island somewhere where everybody's in, then that's another thing, because they're not making a distinction at all. And if they did make a distinction, it was only in this Sagotra, then okay, then it'll be better. But then if you're really worried, then you want to go back 7 generations. The difficulty is who can say 7 generations.
No, this was, in my country, it was like hundreds of years ago, thousands. I'm from Serbia, 5 generations. It was always 5 generations.
Yeah. So with the Vedic is 7.
The law.
It's 7 generations. Is the Vedic. So that's good, because most people in the Western countries, if they know 3 generations, are pretty good. Because 3 means, the 7 means including yourself. So that means 6 generations before. So here if you know yourself, you know your parents, and you maybe know your grandparents. But that's kind of where it did. But traditionally, they know all the way back. They have to know. In the Vedic system of marriage, the importance of Gotra, or family, was stressed. Arjuna also married Subhadra, although she was his maternal cousin sister, because the Gotra is different. That's the whole point. So as long as that's different, it works for those families. But it's a very specific one, because what you get is the nature that you get, because the daughter takes on the nature of the father and the son, the mother. So if you go back in this line, it means that it'll go back where the compatibility of the grandparents will be what is the compatibility of them. So that's why it works so well. So it's a very specific one. Like that. You see, because it's not all of them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's limited in. It's not just all cousins like that. No, it's very specific. Okay, then getting to some, this first canto, I think first, second canto probably will give, especially first they'll give histories of newly introduced, how do you say, personalities. So Janamejaya, so now this is on a history of him. One of the Rajarshi kings and the famous son of Maharaj Pariksit. His mother's name was Iravati, right, because what we just mentioned, the Pariksit Maharaj married. And he begot 4 sons headed by Maharaj Janamejaya. So now we're hearing about Janamejaya. Or his mother's name was Iravati, or according to some, Madhuravati. Maharaj Janamejaya begot 2 sons of the names Gyatanika and Shankukarna. He celebrated several sacrifices in the Kurukshetra pilgrimage site. And he had 3 young brothers named Shrutasena, Ugrasena, and Bhimasena. 2. So, named after Bhima. But, he invaded Takshala, Ajanta, and he decided to avenge the unlawful curse upon his father, Maharaj Pariksit. So Ajanta, because you have the Ajanta caves, that were left from the Buddhists. I think that's on the kind of western side of India. And how far west? Is that Madhya Pradesh? Maharashtra. The Ajanta caves are there. Okay, so then that kingdom, he invaded that area. He performed a great sacrifice called Sarpa Yajna to kill the race of serpents, including the Takshaka, which had bitten his father to death. Because these, including the Takshaka, means his name is Takshaka, but it's also position. Because whenever all these snakes are born, then there's one that's Takshaka. Does that make sense? It's just like in every universe you'll have the 6 sages, Gautama, Vaisheshika, Shankya, all these different sages are there. So every universe you have them. Maybe a different soul each time, but the point is it's a position. There's just that Indra, it's a position. So you can say Indra, or you can say the Indra. Does that make sense? So Takshaka is also, because he's the 3rd, like that. Does that make sense? The first is Ananta, second is Vasuki, and the 3rd is Takshaka. So that's just the order. It keeps on going down. There's thousands of them. Dhritarashtra is one of them. He's a very major snake. You have all these. Karkotaka. It means so many snakes. On the request from many influential demigods and sages, he had to change his decisions to kill the race of snakes. But despite stopping the sacrifice, he satisfied everyone concerned in the sacrifice by rewarding them properly. Right? So the sacrifice was going on, the sacrifice didn't finish. But still, just because it didn't finish didn't mean that he didn't satisfy everyone. Right? So that's also a very important part in one is your personal life, but also in the management is you're doing something, and if the thing isn't complete, it doesn't mean that people don't get paid. Right? If it's their fault, it's like, say, the plumber, he's supposed to fix that, and he only comes into the kitchen and spends an hour and takes everything apart and leaves it all over the floor, and now he's not going to finish his job and he wants to be paid for that hour. No, he's not paid. Right? Because but if it's you stop the work, then he still gets paid. Right? In other words, you bring him in and he starts his work, and okay, he's going to be working for 3 hours and you're going to pay him this amount, but after 1 hour you say, no, someone else is going to do it, or I'll do it myself, or we don't want to do it. Now he gets paid for his 3 hours. You can't say, oh, you only did 1 hour of work. Does that make sense? So the Brahmins, they were doing the sacrifice. And then in doing this, then they would have finished the yajna. Right? They had no problem. But because then the yajna was stopped by the influence, it says, of great personalities and demigods, all the sages and demigods, then they stopped it. Then it's still, they get their proper remuneration. Does that make sense? So proper giving charity, taking care of everyone, even the person who comes and stops, because that was a Brahmin, he's taking care of all the sages, all the guests, everybody's taken care of nicely. It's not that, oh, it didn't finish and no one's taken care of. Does that make sense? So it's an important aspect. Because again, it's back to the personal, because they put in the time, the effort. You know, because they would put in their full-time effort, right? That's the difference between someone who doesn't, right? But it's a matter of facts, not of politics, right? In the ceremony, Mahamuni Vyasadeva was also present, and he personally narrated the history of the battle of Kurukshetra before the king. Later on, by the order of Vyasadeva, his disciple, Vaishampayana narrated before the king the subject matter of Mahabharata. He was much affected by his great father's untimely death and was very anxious to see him again. And he expressed his desire before the great sage Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva also fulfilled his desire. His father was present before him, and he worshipped both his father and Vyas with great respect and pomp. Being fully satisfied, he most munificently gave charities to the Brahmins present at the sacrifice. Yeah. So, at this sacrifice means the snake sacrifice. Then you see is that his battle of Kurukshetra was being discussed, and then also the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata, as we know it, is the description by Vaishampayana to Pariksit Maharaj at his snake sacrifice. And so this whole thing, it takes part there. So you have, again, story in the story in the story. Like Sutta Goswami speaking to the sages at Naimisharanya about the discussion of Pariksit Maharaj and Sukadeva Goswami, which are discussions, which is the main discussion there, which then has discussions in it, like let's say Vidura and Maitreya, like to take up a whole canto, and then in those might be stories of like that. So that's just how the Vedic works very nicely. No one gets bored because you have so many overlapping storylines and all that. Yeah. Text 3. Maharaj Pariksit, after having selected Kripacharya for guidance as his spiritual master, performed 3 horse sacrifices on the banks of the Ganges. These were executed with sufficient rewards for the attendants, and at these sacrifices, even the common man could see the demigods. Right? So you would have these ceremonies, and the demigods would come to them. And as we see, at least it doesn't mention it here, we'll see it in the purport, but in Maharaj Yudhishthir's, in the Rajasuya sacrifice, all the demigods were invited. Right? So that doesn't give detail, but the point is Maharaj Yudhishthira had the qualifications that he could invite the demigods, like that. And so here we can see the common man can see the demigods, so whether they're just coming or whether they were invited, but in any case, demigods don't have to be seen by everyone, but because it was a sacrifice that was going on so nicely, therefore the demigods allowed them to themselves be seen by anyone who came and took part in the effort. Yes?
Maharaj, modern religious researchers, they classify the religion of India into Vaishnavism, Shaivism and Shaktism. So did these classifications exist in the Vedic times, or is it just a modern concoction?
In the Vedic you have Panchapasana. So when we say the demigod worshippers, then they would have 5 areas. Now they're only looking at 2. There were 5. Yeah, so we had Vaishnavas, and then you had the Panchapasana. So the Panchapasana means that worshipping Vishnu in the mode of goodness, worshipping Shiva, worshipping Devi, worshipping the sun god, and worshipping Ganesh. So those were generally your main ways that they were derived. But otherwise you could say is those who are Vaishnavas and those who are worshippers of demigods. Like that. Does that make sense? So they're there, but now they just see these two because they don't know about those who worship Ganesh and the sun. So, you know, because you have to remember, they're sitting in their little cubicle in the university somewhere and looking at books written by other people who sat in cubicles. And who knows how many books you have to go back before they actually went there. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it'll be limited how much they understand. So. Purport. Let's see. Go to 145, no?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It appears from this verse that interplanetary travel by the denizens of higher planets is easy. In many statements in Bhagavatam, we have observed that the demigods from heaven used to visit this earth to attend sacrifices performed by influential kings and emperors. Herein also we find that during the time of the horse sacrifice ceremony of Maharaja Pariksit, the demigods from other planets were visible even to common man due to the sacrificial ceremony, right? Because people came to the ceremony like that, and due to the influence of Maharaj Pariksit, his devotion and how well he's conducting his religious expression, the demigods being pleased, therefore then everybody could see the demigods. Right? The demigods are not generally visible to common men, as the Lord is not visible. But as the Lord, by his causeless mercy, descends to be visible to common man, similarly the demigods also become visible to common man by their own grace. Right? So that's the whole, Krishna comes as the deity, then we can see him. Right? Does that make sense? So it is Krishna, but at the same time, it's whether we're fully appreciating Krishna or we're just appreciating the form that he's come through is another thing. You understand? They're non-different, but we may not catch that non-difference. Right? Does that make sense? So like one devotee was telling me once that he brought his mother to the temple, and naturally he took him into the temple room to see the deities. And after, being in the temple room and going out, so he asked his mother how did she like the deities, and she said, wonderful flower arrangements, but then she was wondering, why are all these, what's the occasion that you have so many flowers in this, place? I mean, she did not see the deity, she only saw the flowers. So that's the thing, is that according to the Lord reveals himself, because otherwise we see nothing, or we only see stone or wood or metal or like this. So as Krishna reveals, then you start to see how it is him. But there's something that you can, with your senses, can see. But at the same time, is to appreciate that on the transcendental level. That's by Krishna's arrangement. Does that make sense? So, although the celestial beings are not visible to the naked eyes of the inhabitants of this earth, it was due to the influence of Maharaj Pariksit that the demigods also agreed to be visible, right? Because they were so pleased with his sacrifice and his mood that anybody who came there, they were very kind and everybody could see. Because it would just add to his glory, and people would take it more seriously. Plus at that stage they didn't have Instagram and Snapchat, so they could peacefully sit there. You can imagine you're Indra and some guy coming, hey, selfie. Yeah. So you didn't get that. So, and then here it'd just be one shot. But if it's in India, which has happened, then as they take their shot, then they bring over their wife and kid, and then not this, and then everyone's standing around. And, it'd take like 10 minutes. Yeah, so. The kings used to spend lavishly during such sacrifices, as a cloud distributes rains. A cloud is nothing but another form of water, or in other words, the waters of the earth transformed into clouds. Similarly, the charity made by the kings in such sacrifices are but another form of the taxes collected from the citizens. Right? So they've collected the taxes from the citizens, and now when they have these major programs like that, then that same tax now is transformed. Now it becomes charity and facility and like that. that they're making, and so they're, you know, making nice arrangements, giving charity, feeding everybody, you know, all the everything's, you know, going on for free, right? You just have to behave properly, you know, dress properly, behave properly. You can't come in there in your, you know, how you say, your sneakers and your shorts. You have to dress properly, right? You have to behave properly. People don't behave properly, then there's police there, they'll take care. So the whole point is that it just comes back. So these big festivals were actually an occasion for it to go back to the people, and they get benefit. But in this, it's a sacrifice, it's religious, and so they get that benefit, right? So we see is that kind of thing, people aren't going to complain, right? But let's say how Marie Antoinette had her programs, then people complain because all it did was just between her and her friends, you know, like that. I think her dog got some benefit also. But, you know, as much as friends, but so it didn't go back to the people, right? The people are struggling, but then they're living very nicely. But here is that kings are living nicely, and so much benefit is going back to the people, so the people are also living nicely, right? Because they have to pay the tax, because they may not do these religious sacrifices, the king will. Therefore, the taxes will go into that. The people won't make the road and fix the road. Right? If there's a pothole in the road, do you think about fixing it? No, you go, man, what kind of government is this? Right? So they have to fix the road. They have to make all this. So that's why they get, so the benefit comes back. So it's not that they just take tax and live nicely. They take tax and then benefit the people, as we said. Protecting the people is the essence of the Kshatriya Dharma. Right? So here, then also, besides the general, just generic things, you know, water, roads, and protection, and all these things, then they also have, how do you say, they give charity and all that, take care of Brahmins, so then education goes on nicely. Does that make sense? They see that there's a peaceful environment, therefore economics go on, right? Does that make sense? When things are peaceful, there's economics, right? Unless you're dealing in things connected with war or something, you know. But otherwise, that's when economics happen, is during peace, not during war, right? When there's peace, then you see the middle class coming up, right? Poor and rich are always there. And then when there's peace, middle class comes up. Now when there's war, the middle class disappears and they're either rich or poor again. Then when it's peace again, the middle class comes up. So you always hear in history everyone talking about the emerging middle class, right? Caesar was talking about it. That's where one of his big power bases were. And that's why the senators who are rich weren't appreciated. Right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about the emerging middle class. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati talks about it. Right? Prabhupada talks about it. So that means every time there's peace, then they come up. Right? Because then you can do business, economics, things get spread more easily. And so it's just a natural thing. Does that make sense? So the kings in this way would benefit. They're making sure all this is going on. Right? Then all the people, and so what's that? By tax money. And then they, on top of that, do religious activities, not just the standard in running of the country, but religious activities where, again, the people are benefiting. But this time they get a particular religious benefit rather than just a nice road or a marketplace or stuff like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And with Jana Vijaya, then it will be the devotional aspect, as we see with, Pariksit Maharaja. Yeah? No? Kind of, yes.
Maharaja, I'm just wondering, I'm just sitting there thinking about, let's say the chapter within ISKCON, and we are reading about taxes. Is the chapter in ISKCON collecting taxes? Should they do it?
But we're living the lifestyle of the Brahmins, so it means one has to be careful. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't be the Brahmins, so therefore you can advise and teach and preach and do all that. At the same time, you're a Kshatriya and you can get all the tax. So, since we run our society as a Brahminical society, it's a Brahminical society. What we're talking about is the governments, then they have taxes. Because the government also could become devotional, but the government will still be there. While we're dealing with temple and community, so it's a Brahminical thing. So as such, we don't have a tax system. I mean, devotees try to establish these things because they're attracted to the bureaucratic governmental concept, but it won't work very well.
What about donations?
Donations are donations. That's a Brahminical thing. I mean, people give donations. It's part of sadhana, isn't it? It's part of your lifestyle. Grihastas make money, they give donations. And anybody, even they get something, they share that. So Vanaprasthas, they get something, they share, everybody shares. So Krishna says in the Gita that austerity, sacrifice, and charity, these are something that even great sages don't give up. So they still follow that. Right? So the sage gets something, and it's money, he shares. So that's just part of sadhana, that's just part of your human development and all that. So it's not as such tax. We can try to, use a crowbar, crowbar?
Yes.
What do you say, what would you call it in the local language? Okay, yeah. Now you can try to take one of those, the crowbar, and try to make it fit. But why do that? Because then a tax is just an official thing. Charity is something religious, something special. Not that the tax doesn't follow the Kshatriya Dharma and all that, but it doesn't have as much, it doesn't have the personal benefit as because then it's that government does this, you do that. So taxes are in proportion to how much you're doing. As we said, if you take taxes and don't actually benefit the people being taxed, you will get all their bad karma. In other words, you will benefit them. Right? So if that's what you want, hey, you can do all you like, but then it doesn't work very well. Like many times, I don't know if you see it here, you see it a lot with the American presidents, that after they're doing all right as the president, as soon as they step out, then just their whole life kind of falls apart, their health, this, that. They don't last very long. Just because they take on so much karma. Does that make sense? So one has to be very, very careful that one is not applying something that's not there. The temple is managed, just like the Pujari department is managed, but that doesn't mean the head Pujari is a Kshatriya. You know what I'm saying? You have temples in India, Tirupati and Guruvayur and all these big temples. They don't tax because they have a manager. You know what I'm saying? Because it's within itself. Otherwise, who would they be taxing? The temple would have to tax the temple devotees. If you're taking it complete in itself, and the managers no, because it's a Brahminical institution. So the whole thing works on that. That's why donation is there. That's why we talk about distributing books. It's not business. It's we're giving knowledge. People being satisfied, they give a donation. Does that make sense? So that's how it works.
One day maybe.
But that's administration, governments.
The government.
Because they're already taking taxes, so you don't have to worry about implementing.
No, in Sweden we are trying to organize ISKCON, kind of connecting it with the government so we get part of the taxes.
Yeah, but then that's charity from the government, and you're qualified because of being Brahminical. For the Kshatriyas, you can't get charity. So that's what I'm saying. You can't have your cake and eat it. So for Brahmins, then we can accept charity from the government. And for Kshatriyas, we can't. Yeah, so that's the thing, is we don't take which one we want. And then at the end of the day, then we're not this body Prabhu, and then we can do all the other things that we want. So that's what Prabhupada was saying before about those, that they don't... There were no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some purpose. So Prabhupada's already addressing that point, is that we're Brahmins. That's the whole point. Within that, yes, we have Brahma, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra nature, so that's why within the Brahminical context, we do different services. Right? So to someone who has managerial abilities, then they do management. But they don't have to be a Kshatriya to do it. They have that business. They have that ability. So we're doing it because we're working within the devotional context. So that way everyone's Brahmins. But it doesn't mean that we're not engaged according to our nature. Does that make sense?
Well, to be honest, not totally. But, we have the Brahmin, each one has their own nature.
Yes.
But at the same time, we're saying we're Brahmins. So then
We're Brahman is by consciousness, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean your conditioned nature is Brahman. And it's like I have let's say I have a frying pan, I have a knife, and I have a spoon. Okay? Now, these are in a non-devotee's kitchen, right? So they're a frying pan, a knife, and a spoon. Now let's say they go into a devotee's kitchen. Now does that make a difference? No. Okay, let us say a neophyte devotee is dealing with these. They're a pan, a knife, and a spoon. Let's say a solid preacher is dealing with them. There's still a frying pan, a knife, and a spoon. Let's say an Uttamadhikari is dealing with them. Still that. What if Lord Chaitanya himself comes and deals, or Mother Jashoda, or like that? It's still a frying pan, a knife, and a spoon. So the point is we have our conditioned nature. That conditioned nature remains. That is the knowledge and skills we can engage in Krishna's service. But point is Brahman means one who knows Brahman. So Vaishnavas know Brahman. They know the Supreme Brahman. So therefore, on that platform, they function within the Brahmana context. So in ashram-wise, we function as Brahmins. But in Varna, we'll function according to our nature. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's how the Daiva Varnashram works. We will engage that in Krishna's service. So now if we're in the temple, we're engaging that conditioned nature, let's say of a Kshatriya, in managerial duties connected with the temple, but it doesn't make us a Kshatriya, we're just engaging that nature, right? But let's say we're working in the outside world and we're working in governance and that, then we may be classified as a Kshatriya, because that's how it works there. But within devotional service, you don't have to. Does that make sense? But it doesn't mean that you don't do the activity of that nature.
It's just classified as.
Yeah, because you're classified, the temple president is not classified as a Kshatriya, he's a devotee. But let's say he's the mayor, then you may say, okay, that's working in the Kshatriya area. Right? So down in Hungary, the temple president could be classified as a Kshatriya because he is the mayor of that village next door. Like that, but that's for the village. But in the temple, he's a devotee. But he's the one managing, so therefore the manager is above the economics, is above those who just do general work, but below those who have that political ability to direct. You understand? Because otherwise, if you don't know the hierarchy, how does it work? It's still just because we're devotees doesn't change the order. It's just like, again, you have the stove, then on top of that's the fire, on top of that's the pan, and on top of that's the vegetables. Right? And on top of that's the lid. Right? So it's still going to be, it doesn't matter if you're a devotee or not, that order won't change. Because that's the way the laws of nature are, that's how Krishna's created it. So we can say we're not this body and do whatever we want. And it's like, yeah, right. How does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't, yeah. So just by using we're not the body doesn't change what your body is. Like, for me to use the frying pan, then I'm not the frying pan. Does that mean now it's not a frying pan? I can use the frying pan as a grater? Or a shoehorn? Right? Shoehorn. There's funny, kind of depends. So like there's different size that they have a handle at the end and the middle's kind of curved a little bit. You put it in your shoe, you put your foot inside if you wear a formal shoe. What is that called? Yes, okay. So now, can I use the frying pan as a shoehorn? Or the shoehorn as a frying pan? Because I'm not this shoehorn. And it's not a real philosophy. People pass it off as a real philosophy, but it's not. Right? I'm not this body means I should be making considerations based on I'm the soul, and I'm not the controller and enjoyer. I'm servant of Krishna. That's where I'm not the body comes in. That I should do sacrifice for Krishna. Now, What services I'll do, what I can do, that's based on what condition nature you have, what your body and mind is. I'm not that, but that doesn't mean that it changes. Does that make sense? Right? Does this make sense? Works? That works for what we were saying before? You're good, or?
It works. It says it's still Kshatriya.
No, but why is it Kshatriya? It means he's engaging a Kshatriya nature.
Yeah.
But where is he engaging the Kshatriya nature? Is running a temple a Kshatriya job?
Okay, I understand, but it has to do with identification then.
Yeah, it's just like
I'm a
this.
servant of Krishna and I'm using this body
Yes.
that I got now as, but I'm not the body, that's why I can't call myself Kshatriya. I'm a servant of Krishna and I'm using this instrument.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, I read something about the Dapur Yoga, the Kurukshetra war front. So the activities of Krishna is they complement as a political activities of Krishna is the Kurukshetra war front.
Okay.
And Krishna did made by the Arjuna. That's these political activities. So now you are telling about the politics and Krishna consciousness.
Mhm.
So is it possible in the modern world the politics, what kind of nature of the politics, is it possible by the performing of the Krishna consciousness? Because
Is it possible to be Krishna conscious in the modern administrative environment?
Because why I am asking this question?
I mean,
that,
just one question, just where are you from originally?
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh, okay.
So we see the modern politics is almost the gambling.
That's another thing. Now you get into detail.
Yeah.
Your question is, can you be Krishna conscious and apply Krishna conscious principle in a modern administrative sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, one can always be God conscious. It's just a matter of how nicely, means in other words, the Vedic system is about God consciousness, and they also give the recommendation on what's the best environment to apply to be Krishna conscious, right? So, therefore, the Krishna conscious element can always be applied. And then how close to the Vedic version we can, our environment that we're in, that will be according to the situation. So if we can make it more towards the Vedic version, it will work better. And if it's not, it will work less efficiently. So all it is the Vedas are recommending what's the most efficient systems for doing any of these external activities. But the Krishna consciousness is not dependent upon them. Right? As a neophyte, we may be affected by them because we identify with and we have all that, but technically devotion is not affected by it. You know, our consciousness may be only because we identify with the external. But as we start identifying more with Krishna and less with the external, then it doesn't affect us so much. You understand? Yeah, so it can be. You may not be able to do as much, it may be only you can be Krishna conscious, but that you can do. Now, whether you can influence others, like we see Pariksit Maharaja was able to do. So therefore, by his Krishna consciousness and the environment he's in, he could get others to be God conscious. So, does that make sense? But as the rains fall down very lavishly and appear to be more than necessary, the charity made by such kings also seems to be more than what the citizen needs. Satisfied citizens will never organize agitation against the king, unless there was no need in changing the monarchical state. Right? It means that the king is there, you didn't need to change the state. It means either change the king or change the concept of administration, because the kings took care of people so nicely. Because that's all people are looking for, is they have a comfortable situation in which they can run the life they're happy. Right? It's not something that disturbs them in that. So we see that there was no change because they took care nicely. So you may say, oh, they've gotten more than they needed, but you're dealing with citizens who they themselves being properly trained, then they get more than they need. They distribute it again in charity, because not necessarily everybody's there at the sacrifice. So then you're distributing, but you're getting extra to others. Does that make sense? And even if it's distributed, but the Brahmins, they get, let's say they get 10,000 cows, they only need 10 cows. They'll give the other 9,990 cows away to other Brahmins. So now they only have that. This doesn't mean the other things they can't receive. So then now so now you're also giving charity to them and this. So like this, it's just like it's saying, the rain is the taxes are going to the government, it's coming down, it gets spread out again, and then from there it can go like that.
Maharaj, can you say that facilities which devotees gets, is it like accordance to what they can manage to?
What they get is according to what they manage. It means if you're working under temple authority, it's whatever you need for your service and your situation. Because more than that, then, because you have to see is that there must be a balance. Because he's not doing this on a regular basis. How often we see he did 3 Ashrameta yajnas. He wasn't like doing one every day. So he's doing these 3. At that time it's elaborate like that, and other times it'll be regular. So now and again it's just like, okay, we have a festival, we have a big feast, and then you appreciate the feast. And then every day you have a regular prasad. Now let's say every day is a feast, now you start taking it for granted and not actually take it seriously. You know what I'm saying? So if it's a festival, you'll take part, you'll do so much nice work and everything's taken care of. And you also get very nice prasad and everything like that. And now if it's every day is prasad like that, then you may not want to do your service because you're okay. You go in and there's so much, I can just go and pick just the cheese out of the sabji and that's all I eat. In fact, I even wash the cheese off, so all that sauce takes up space. And so then like that. And so then I don't care anymore. I don't need to do any service in that. So you understand? So you have to balance it. So that's the administrator. He knows how to balance. He knows how much to give. So he's giving an excess here, and that's good. But at other times, then it's just regular.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not constantly doing. Otherwise, that's sentimental. People can't handle that. It means great people who are renounced can handle it because it's not important to them anyway. But people who are attached, they get too much on a regular basis, they become lazy. So people can't become lazy either. Everybody has to be doing their duties. So that's the king's business, to see everyone's engaged in their occupational duties. So if anyone's lazy, then that's improper. They have to do their work. Otherwise, if not, the king will engage them in work. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it can't be they're just getting charity and doing nothing. No. The Brahmins, they're getting charity, but then they're always engaged in studying the scriptures, teaching, deity work, all these things. So they're always active. That's why you don't have the welfare state where you don't have a job, you just get money, and then you don't have to get a job because you just, get your money. You understand? It's that you have no money, you get money, but as soon as a job is available, you take it, you earn money, the government stops giving. Right? And then, from that money you're making, now they start taking tax. So that if there's a problem again in the future, there's money there, they can pay you. You understand? So it has to be balanced. That's why the detail is not being given in here, because that's given in other places. What's being given here is how to be Krishna conscious during all that. What's the Krishna conscious consideration? Because that's the most essential. As we said, the impression is the concrete. So if you're getting a Krishna conscious impression, that's concrete. If we just are managing things nicely, that's not concrete, because today it's managed nice, tomorrow it disappears. Today people care, tomorrow they don't. But if there's the samskar, the impression of this is good, that's what Prabhupada said, that the citizens never organize agitation, because the experiencing is good. So who wants to go against something good? So it's not a political thing, it's a religious thing. It takes care of the political needs, But the king's doing this on religious principles, and the political is automatically taken care of. You do dharma, art is taken care of, because art or economics, that's where politics are. Right? In dharma, there's no politics. Yeah, that's why the political scripture of India is called Arthashastra, because that's where politics is. Right? You only make politics over gain. You don't make politics over the performance of your own duty. You know, otherwise you're going to make politics with yourself in the mirror. You know, when you get up in the morning, you drag yourself to the kitchen, into the bathroom. Should be bathroom first, right? In the West, it's kitchen because you're making coffee. Devotees, they go to the bathroom first. Right? So when you get in the bathroom and there's a mirror, you again, like that, and then start this whole thing, this whole rivalry. I brush my teeth better than you do. Yeah. So that's the whole thing. Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Even for a king like Maharaja Pariksit, there was no need of a spiritual master for guidance. Oh, there was need, excuse me. There was no, because there was no, okay. Even for a king like Maharaja Pariksit, there was need of a spiritual master for guidance. Without such guidance, one cannot make progress in spiritual life, right? So he's performing kingly duties as his spiritual activity, how he'll advance in spiritual life, because you advance by doing something. The spiritual master must be bona fide, and one who wants to have self-realization must approach and take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master to receive real success, right? Because otherwise, performing your material duties, you get material success, right? But performing your duties to please Krishna, that's real success. So real success already includes success, but success doesn't necessarily include real success. That makes sense? So you can be Krishna conscious and be expert at your duties, but being expert at your duties doesn't automatically make you Krishna conscious. So that's there for the spiritual master, because the guidance how to be spiritual in the process, that's the most important. If that's there, then everything will work nicely. Right? Does that make sense? Then you can go about applying your knowledge, technique, your abilities in Krishna's service. But if we focus on simply the knowledge and skills, then the difficulty comes is what realization will you get from knowledge and skills, right? The karmis get, I'm the controller and enjoyer, right? So if we want the realization, I'm servant of Krishna, that means it's the knowledge and skills can't produce that. That means I'm Krishna conscious while applying my knowledge and skills. That's what gives me realization. Does that make sense? So that has to very much be part of the whole process. Can't not be part of the process. Yeah? We're good? Okay, text 4. Once when Maharaj Pariksit was on his way to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Shudra, disguised as a king and herding the legs of a cow and buffalo. Right? So you had all these mixes of things. He's presenting himself as a king, but he's acting lower than a Shudra. And then in this, he's not just doing lower than a Shudra stuff, he's harassing a cow, he's harassing Dharma. So it's not only is he not following Dharma, he's harassing Dharma. The king at once caught hold of him to deal sufficient punishment. So it's not that he sat back and was worried about what's the political correct this and that and doing all this. It's just, this is wrong according to scripture. He just immediately acts. Then, seeing what's going on there, then it'll be done. So does that make sense? Something's immediately done, and then you, any adjustments that need to be made, you make that while the process is going on. Because if you let something go, then there'll be a problem. Yeah. Purport. The purpose of a king's going out to conquer the world is not for self-aggrandizement. Okay? So it's not a social thing. Maharaj Pariksit went out to conquer the world after his ascendance to the throne, but this was not for the purpose of aggression on other states. He was the emperor of the world, and all small states were already under his regime, right? So he's already, as the emperor, he's already in control of all those states. So why would he go out, right? So there's something more here than just the administration. His purpose in going out was to see how things were going on in terms of the godly state. In other words, he's managing, it means he is the emperor, is in control of that lower state. It's being managed by the local king. So he's not micromanaging. That's another very important point to know, is that, okay, you have the temple president, and then he has all his department heads, right? So that means he's not micromanaging those departments. The department head manages it, right? But what's the president doing? He's seeing about how godly or considered Krishna conscious methods are being used to manage that area. That's his business. Because he's already in charge of all those. Right? But you have someone there to run it. That way, that's how he's able to manage all the departments of the temple, because he's not directly dealing with all of them. But he knows them, he can do them himself. But he has someone there, therefore he can do so much. Like the head Pujari can also take care of the Sankirtan, can also then cook lunch, can also, you understand? So you have all these individuals doing these things, then he's able to oversee it. The main thing is overseeing is, are they Krishna conscious, like we first started. The whole point of management is the seed of Krishna consciousness. Now, the temple president then is in charge to see that. So the department head who's doing it, they may be Krishna conscious or not, so the temple president sees that happens. And in the meantime, he can also see how it's managed. But we see that's secondary to the primary. This is quite a big confusion. Discussing with one leader about how, when we talk about the GBC, then Prabhupada's always talking about that there are duties like that as sannyasi, about seeing to the spiritual development, standards of the society, the expansion of society. But it was very popular at the time to know that the GBC, they get into all the management details. And so yes, Prabhupada does mention that you check these things, right? But that's there. So I mentioned this to this one person. They said, yes, 60% of the time Prabhupada talks about this higher element, the more Krishna conscious element. 40% of the time he talks about, he looks at the accounts and stuff like that. And so then having heard that from the doubt, then we go to now how you're going to, what was it? Apprehension and misapprehension. Correct apprehension and misapprehension. So then from that, then this manager, from that process of doubt, of the, rational, I say, not rational, what do you call it when you think? Analytical, but it's something with an R, I think, what it means.
Reflection?
Yeah, whatever, yeah, that's what I can't remember.
Rationalize.
You're going through and then seeing to the logic of the
Inference.
like that. You're using inference. So then from inference now, then he came up with a misapprehension of, therefore we're going to focus on this 40%. And the 60%, because it's devotional, we're devotees, it's automatically happening. So it's a very major mistake. So therefore, the major thing is this. What's the proper apprehension and all that? And what does Shastra say? That's what's going to be done. So he's seeing to the Krishna consciousness of all the management in the temple. But at the same time, to check, he's also seeing that the secondary aspects are going on. Now, if it's obvious they're going nicely, you don't have to check. And if you're not sure, then you check. You see the schedule, you see the budget, you see, what's doing what, all these different things. That you do. But that's only for the purpose that everybody's Krishna conscious. Does this make sense? So that's how it works. That's how it's going on. So here, Maharaj Pariksit, he's already in charge of all these kingdoms, meaning that he's the senior most in here. Now he's just going around to see, are they God conscious in their application? Right? Because through his spies, he'll know if they're managing properly. Right? They're paying their taxes, they're doing this. The spies can tell him all that, but now he wants to go see what's the attitude, what's the mood. Like that. And then he comes across this king not behaving very nicely. Right? Does that make sense? Yes.
Isn't it very difficult to estimate somebody's like Krishna consciousness? How can we really know what is their inner mood?
Means by the external symptoms. Means how do you know if anything's going nicely? How do I know management's going nicely? Because management is technically, as we discussed in the beginning, it's an attitude. Right? So how do we know? We go by symptoms. You come in, you see, okay, all those chairs are the same. It's not, there's an armchair, and there's a little stool, and there's this other broken thing, and there's this other thing with one arm on it. Like that, they're all the same. Now, why are they all the same? That doesn't happen by chance. It's like they needed a chair, they went into the local store. Here they got that chair, and then they needed another chair, but this was closed, so they went downtown to one place, and they got the same chair, because everybody all has the same chair. They only sell this chair. I mean, in Finland, sorry, 2 countries back. So. You're okay with that, though. Yeah,
That's easy.
that's not easy. How many people notice that? Those are the same. Those 2 over there are the same. You have the box on here on this little stool like that. Now over there, Prabhupada's feet are on the same kind of thing, so it's the same treatment. But that table is specifically for Prabhupada's feet. It's not this big white thing. It's this very fine thing. That's management. The whole floor is all this color and not that. You don't have patches out, this piece of linoleum somewhere. That's management. And then you have this brown floor, it goes up into this other slightly color here, and the walls are none other than the ceiling. That blend from white down to this brown, that's management. So you can go, just walk into the place, and if you know management, you can tell if it's being managed. That's the point. When you first walk in the front door of the temple, you can already tell how well the temple's managed, just by that. Maybe you can sometimes just by the door, outside the door, the steps. So you can tell as you go. So it's symptoms how you tell. Like how do you tell someone's a gentleman? You can see by how they dress, they hold themselves, how they talk. Does that make sense? That's why it says, because it's symptoms. A fool is only revealed when he speaks. Because otherwise he can look really good, but as soon as he opens his mouth, then there's a problem. Because the symptom. You understand? So it's just a matter of that, and then if you're not sure, then you check. That's what we're saying. Then the temple president may check accounts. He may check other things. Like a certain amount of money is going in, but at the same time, certain things aren't getting done, but it's enough money to get it done. So where is the money going? So then he checks. But if he sees everything's nice, why check the accounts? Why waste your time? But if you think just because you check accounts and therefore they're your manager, then that's an accountant. Accountants are hired by managers, right? In other words, an accountant technically is a shudra, like that. You might have a Brahmin who oversees like that, but technically speaking, is that. So just because I can see accounts, like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's things that you go by symptoms.
Yeah, I mean the material symptoms are easy to understand. Okay, this place is managed, but when it comes to is the person Krishna conscious?
If it's
is the person Krishna conscious?
that also symptoms. How else are you going to tell? Are they chanting? How they behave? Are they interested in Krishna conscious activities or? What I'm saying? Like here, we're discussing about Krishna. Are they here or are they out? In the parking lot. They're getting a good spot in the sun, and they're on their phone. And laughing and sending texts. Then okay, there's something wrong here. You understand? You go by that, because otherwise, how can you know? Only Krishna knows. He's in the heart. Now he can tell. So in other words, you only have to tell as much as you're responsible for. Like that. Otherwise, then why even worry about it? So if this person is doing their service, they're comfortable in their service, others are comfortable with the interaction with them and all that, then generally things are going well. But if they're not comfortable, others aren't comfortable, service not going, then there's something wrong here. So is it a matter of they're not Krishna conscious enough, or it's a matter of they're in the wrong service? So in other words, the first thing you check is they're Krishna conscious. That's the ashram side. If that's good, and it's still a problem, then it may be they're not supposed to do that service. You have them managing something they're not a manager. You know, or they're a manager, but not of that, of something else. You know, does that make sense? Like you have them in the Pujari department, they'll be better in Sankirtan, or Sankirtan in the Pujari, or someone else in the kitchen. Like that. Does that make sense? So, because all you can go is you don't know the mind and all that. So that's why you go by symptoms. That's why the secondary is there. Things are expressed through the secondary. You work with the secondary, but the whole point is the primary. So since it's the unseen, we have to talk about it a lot. In other words, we take it that the external, the secondary, that's the substance. When it's not, that's the shadow. The Krishna consciousness, connection to Krishna, that's the primary. And the activities we do, that's in connection with that. So, yeah. Okay, we're good for today. So we'll continue on tomorrow to find out what happens with Kali Raj.
Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,